How does one fight at a club about a simple dance and end up staring at a divorce petition in a courthouse lobby? Why did my husband stay so calm while I treated our marriage like a costume I could take off for the night? I'm Cassia Layton, and in my story, I am never the problem. I say I am just protecting my freedom after marriage and motherhood. Inside, I know I enjoy walking right on the edge of trouble. That Thursday on the Harbour Line rooftop looked harmless, almost boring at first. There were bright cocktails, city lights, and my sister promising necessary chaos. Bree said wives should never act like their lives were already finished. Evan only came because I nagged him about showing up for once. Even then, he hovered near the railing, watching skyscrapers instead of our group. I noticed him flinch when I laughed too loud at the bartender's joke. I leaned across the high table and enjoyed the bartender's eyes on my chest. At that moment, I decided Evan needed to see if other people still wanted me. Not just as Nora's mother, but as a woman who could command attention. I told myself reminding him of that was healthy, maybe even necessary. Bree wrapped her arm around me, smelling like cheap wine and expensive perfume. She whispered that the real party waited downstairs on the club dance floor. She claimed married women went there to remember they were alive, not buried. Her words felt like permission and accusation together, and I clung to permission. Evan had already said he was fine with dancing if I respected our marriage. To me, that sounded exactly like rules, supervision, and a private permission slip. I translated his boundaries into him wanting control over every step I ever took. When he asked what kind of club it was, I heard interrogation instead. She laughed hard and said only insecure men panicked about harmless club fun. I let that become my shield, proof that he was the unreasonable one. Our group chat pinged then, the one cheerfully called Bad Decisions Only by Bree. The notification showed glitter heels and a caption about dancing like we were single. I tilted my phone so Bree could see and Evan definitely could not. The rooftop air felt colder around him than around us under string lights. I decided he was trying to control the whole mood by existing there. When he finally spoke, his calm office voice asked for one simple boundary. He wanted me not to let random men press against me on the floor. In my head, I translated that into him wanting ownership of my body. I reacted to my translation, not his sentence, because it served my storyline. I heard myself saying he did not trust me and wanted me locked home. The people nearby heard that version, the one where I was the victim. Bree immediately backed me, insisting dancing was not cheating and insecure men feared fun. I watched Evan's shoulders sink just a little, barely visible under the string lights. The truth then was quieter, just him setting his empty glass down slowly. While I checked my lipstick in my front camera, his smartwatch lit up briefly. I saw a dismissed reminder that read, Harbourview 9:10 a.m., meeting personally. I rolled my eyes because of course he had some boring secret appointment. He had been unusually calm all day after that, less reactive to my poking. Instead of finding that change unsettling, I labelled it sulking and silent manipulation. Bree suggested we finally head downstairs and stop wasting time on the rooftop pretending. I told Evan he could join us or go home to his spreadsheets. I added that whichever choice he made would prove how much of a man he was. He replied there was no problem with music, only with me pretending unmarried again. I laughed loudly so everyone could register how unreasonable he supposedly sounded to me. As we walked toward the elevator, neon reflections slid over the closed metal doors. I tugged my wedding ring off my finger and onto the thin chain. I told myself it was practical, so it would not vanish on the floor. Secretly, I enjoyed how light my bare hand looked around my tiny clutch. I saw Evan notice that movement and stare at my emptied ring finger. His expression did not explode, it just went distant, almost finished, which irritated me. I wanted dramatic jealousy, not this quiet withdrawal that made me feel like a villain. Bree pulled me into the elevator while Evan stayed outside, hovering near the doorway. He said he would head home and did not want another hallway argument tonight. I decided I would later retell that as him, forbidding me from enjoying life. The elevator began moving, bass from the club thudding faintly through the floor. My phone buzzed again with a message from Bad Decisions Only, encouraging single behavior. I smiled at the screen as if someone had finally handed written permission. The elevator doors opened straight into the Harbour Line Club, swallowing us whole. Lights snapped and slid across the ceiling like restless, colourful lightning above everyone's heads. The bass punched my ribs in steady waves, loud enough to blame anything on. Bree grabbed my hand immediately and dragged me through a knot of strangers. People were already pressed shoulder to shoulder, sweat and perfume mixing into humid air. I felt the familiar thrill of being somewhere my husband hated. That alone made every beat feel sharper, like I was getting younger. I reminded myself that tonight I was just proving I was still desirable. Luca spotted us near the bar and lifted his chin in greeting. He always did that slow smile that felt like a mirror for vanity. Bree squealed his name and threw herself into a half-hug, half-dance move. I hung back for a second, imagining Evan going home to his spreadsheets. That picture made me feel both guilty and triumphant, which I called complicated. Luca slid over, complimented Bree's outfit, then let his eyes linger on me. I told myself it was innocent because he talked to everyone that way here. Still, when his hand touched my arm to lead us toward the floor, I did not move away. Bree shouted something about married girls needing the most attention and Luca laughed. We stepped into the middle of the dance floor where bodies already blurred together. Luca moved behind me and matched my rhythm, hands loose near my hips. I told myself we were just using each other to keep balance in the crowd. I leaned back anyway, feeling his breath somewhere near my neck as we swayed. The song changed into one I loved, and I raised both arms high. A stranger's phone flashed near us, catching our angles in a quick shimmering burst. I thought about Evan's face when I told him I wanted freedom. I pictured showing him videos later, convincing myself he would eventually understand. Bree circled us, filming short clips and shouting about how alive we looked. She posted one immediately with a caption that read, "Married who?" under flashing emojis. I laughed at the ridiculousness and pretended the caption did not sting slightly. For a moment I wondered if Luca knew my daughter's name or even my job. I brushed that thought away because it ruined the soundtrack and the lights. Another track began, slower, the kind of beat that encouraged closer dancing automatically. Luca's hands settled more firmly around my waist, fingers pressing through thin fabric. I hesitated only a second, then pushed my hips against his, answering the rhythm. In my mind, I repeated the phrase, "It is only dancing like a shield." Bree cheered from the side and shouted something about Evan needing to relax already. I could almost hear Evan's measured voice reminding me he had only asked for boundaries. I twisted that memory until he sounded tyrannical, then fed myself that version. Someone must have tagged the club because my phone buzzed twice in my clutch. Between songs, I pulled it out and saw Bree's story already climbing views. The thumbnail showed Luca behind me, our bodies close, my ring hand hidden. Messages poured into Bad Decisions Only, praising my energy and calling me fearless. One text from Maya asked quietly if I was sure I wanted this posted. I rolled my eyes at her caution and wrote that Evan deserved to see it. I told myself humiliating him a little would finally force him to change. Back at the bar, I ordered shots and told Luca they were celebration shots. When he asked what we were celebrating, I said my temporary single mood tonight. Bree cackled and repeated the phrase loudly, making sure nearby strangers heard us clearly. A guy beside us shouted that married people made the wildest club guests ever. I pretended his comment proved everything I had been saying about modern relationships. Then I noticed Evan's name lighting my phone screen, calling again from home. My stomach fluttered with annoyance, not worry, and I declined without thinking twice. I sent a quick text saying everything was fine, and I was with friends. I conveniently left out Luca's hands and the captions and the chanting crowd. After that, I turned my phone face down and decided not to care. The music made ignorance feel easy, heavy with drums and cheap courage. Luca leaned closer and spoke into my ear about after-party plans downtown later. I told him I would see how the night went, enjoying the suggestion. Bree already agreed loudly for all of us, folding me into their assumption. Another stranger held his phone higher, recording us as the chorus hit again. The way Luca's hands framed my waist would look intimate in any angle. I thought if Evan saw it, he would finally realize how lucky he was. That ridiculous thought made sense in the club fog, so I believed it strongly. Eventually, I noticed my feet aching and waved toward the smoking patio for air. Bree followed, still laughing, while Luca grabbed his drink and stayed close. Outside, the night wind cooled the sweat on my chest and shoulders. I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls and several unread texts. Evan had written asking if I was safe and when I was coming. The words looked calm, not panicked, which irritated me more than shouting would. I typed that I was fine, that he needed to stop smothering me. Bree watched my screen and said he was acting like my father, not husband. That line felt perfect, so I repeated it aloud until it sounded factual. Nearby, a couple whispered about how harsh our caption had been toward Evan. I heard my name and the word married in their conversation, and pretended not to. Luca joined us, draping an arm around my shoulders with easy confidence. I let him, telling myself it meant nothing in real daylight language. Another flash hit as someone took a picture of the 3 of us together. I laughed, imagining how the photo would irritate Evan in the morning. That image fed me enough that I could ignore the awkward twist inside. Eventually, the night blurred into more drinks, more dancing, more exaggerated gestures. At some point, Evan stopped calling completely, and my notifications turned mostly social. I convinced myself his silence was proof that he did not really care. When the club finally thinned out, Luca asked if we wanted a ride. Bree eagerly agreed, and I let her answer for both of us without thinking. We ended up grabbing late food instead, crowded around a sticky table. Bree replayed clips on her phone, pausing on the one where Luca held me. She zoomed in on our almost overlapping faces and cackled like it was a joke. I said the angle made it look closer than it actually was on the floor. Inside, I knew that was not true, but the sentence soothed my conscience. By the time I got home, dawn was a pale smear over the buildings. I stumbled through the apartment hallway, heels clicking too loudly on the floor. The living room lamp was off, but I saw a thin folder on the console. Its label read, "Household," and the paper edges were perfectly aligned in a stack. I rolled my eyes and decided Evan was sulking with bills as always. In the bedroom, his side of the bed was empty, sheets smooth and cool. My phone buzzed again, showing Bree had reposted another video with a married man captioning. I smiled at the screen, called it harmless, and collapsed with makeup still on. When I finally dragged myself up late the next morning, the apartment felt different. Evan was already gone, his mug rinsed and placed alone on the counter. 2 mugs stood apart like separate planets, one near the kettle, one by the sink. As I passed the nightstand, his phone lit briefly with a muted call. I saw the word private, and a small calendar reminder slide across the screen. It read, Old Town 3:35 p.m. meeting personnel in small letters. I scoffed and decided he was booking therapy for his jealousy or something dramatic. That afternoon he came home quieter, oddly calm, without asking about my night. He listened when I complained about my headache, and then went to the guest room. Later, when I peeked into the living room, his laptop sat open on the coffee table. A spreadsheet with initials and dates filled the screen before he minimized it quickly. I told myself it was work nonsense and teased him for bringing the office home. He just nodded, eyes distant, and said he was catching up on things. I did not push further because another notification showed more views on Bree's story. I chose those numbers over his expression, convincing myself I had clearly won something. I kept telling myself the club videos were harmless, almost educational proof. Bree said if Evan saw them, maybe he would finally modernize. I agreed loudly, pretending not to care that his co-workers followed my account. When Bree invited everyone to her birthday dinner, I felt strangely nervous. I knew half the guests had already seen the Harbour Line stories. That made me want to double down instead of admit any discomfort. We arrived at the family restaurant early, a long table reserved near the windows. The place smelled like garlic bread and birthday candles waiting to be lit. I chose a seat near the middle, perfect for holding everyone's attention. Evan sat at the far end, deliberately close to the exit door. He greeted people politely, no drama, which somehow annoyed me even more. I wanted him rattled so I could call him controlling and unstable. Instead, he smiled faintly and asked Nora about school while avoiding my eyes. Nora chatted about art class, oblivious to the strange weight between us. Bree showed up late, loud as always, already holding a half-finished cocktail. She hugged me first and whispered that tonight we were telling every detail. Her voice promised chaos again like the rooftop, and I leaned into it. Soon the table filled with relatives, co-workers, random friends Bree collected at parties. Lorna fussed over Bree's hair while asking me whether married life felt too quiet. I laughed dramatically and said married life felt like a permanent parental supervision system. Several people chuckled, and I saw Evan's jaw tighten for a second. That tiny reaction fed me more than the entire plate of free appetizers. When everyone had drinks, Bree tapped her glass and demanded a story. She said I should tell them why Evan hates music now so much. I rolled my eyes and launched into my carefully edited version of Thursday. I told them he had tried to drag me from the dance floor. I said he shouted that married women must never dance with strange men. I described his voice as furious, his grip as almost bruising, his temper explosive. Around me, gasps and laughter mixed until the whole table buzzed with outrage. People looked at Evan like he had confessed something shameful and embarrassing. He opened his mouth once, then closed it, breathing slowly like counting numbers. He finally said he had only asked for some respect, not ownership. Of course, I repeated his sentence back with a different tone and meaning. I acted like he had admitted wanting total control over my every movement. Bree clapped and announced that insecure men always say respect when they mean prison. Lorna nodded thoughtfully and said, "Men get jealous when they have something valuable." She tilted her head at me like I was the prize Evan mishandled. Everyone laughed except Evan, who just stared at his napkin, fingers tracing patterns. For a moment I noticed how tired he looked, how thin around eyes. That observation made me uncomfortable, so I turned it into another punchline quickly. I joked that my husband studied spreadsheets more than he studied his wife. The table roared, and someone shouted that he needed lessons from Luca immediately. Bree pulled out her phone and opened the Harbour Line clips like trophies. She set the volume high enough that nearby tables heard the pounding bass. The video of Luca behind me played, our bodies moving almost together. Someone whistled and said that did not look like something a jealous husband deserved. Another cousin muttered that if Evan complained about that, he would be unbearable. I watched Evan's face as he realized strangers here had watched those same clips. He did not slam the table or storm out the door dramatically. Instead, he lowered his gaze, took a slow breath, and sipped his drink. Something about that quiet response scared me more than any shouting could. I convinced myself he was just sulking, building ammunition for later manipulative guilt. Bree raised her glass and proposed a toast to women refusing prison marriages. Half the table repeated prison marriages like it was a hilarious phrase for Instagram. She said if husbands wanted statues, they should marry marble, not living women. I laughed, clinked glasses, and pretended not to see Nora watching us silently. My daughter sat between Janet and Evan, eyes moving back and forth carefully. Janet did not laugh during the toast, she only tightened her grip protectively. Later, Janet leaned toward Nora, saying something quiet I could not quite hear. I decided she was turning my child against me with old-fashioned shame speeches. During dessert, a neighbor from our building stopped by to greet Bree cheerfully. She glanced at me and smirked before mentioning seeing my dancing online recently. She said I looked very single that night at Harbour Line, almost unrecognizable. The comment landed like a dropped glass, sharp and ringing through the conversation. I laughed louder than necessary and said maybe I should update my relationship status. People chuckled, but Nora stared at her plate, shoulders pulled slightly toward herself. Evan thanked the neighbor politely and guided conversation back toward Bree's promotion news. His calm redirection annoyed me because it made my joke feel childish suddenly. After dinner, some of us headed back toward Harbour Line for a shorter after-party. I went partly to prove I was still the fun sister everyone expected. Evan declined immediately, saying he would take Nora home and needed early rest. I muttered that he loved hiding behind bedtimes whenever life got interesting. In the rideshare, Bree replayed more clips and brainstormed new captions for posting. She suggested one saying, "My husband can stay mad, my hips pay rent." I pretended to love it, even though a small part of me flinched. At the after-party bar, the screen above the DJ flickered with random videos. Suddenly, someone cast Bree's story onto it, projecting my dance onto the wall. The crowd cheered automatically, not knowing any context beyond two bodies pressed close. Bree bowed dramatically and pointed at me like I was the night's star. I tried to enjoy it, tried to let the attention feel purely glamorous. Instead, I saw, in my mind, Nora's face if she saw this projection. To drown that image, I ordered extra drinks and leaned harder into performance. Later, when I finally headed home alone, the city felt harsher and quieter. The supermarket near our building was still open, humming under bright fluorescent lights. I ducked in to buy snacks, telling myself I needed something salty. At the checkout, another neighbor recognized me and mentioned Bree's posted videos casually. He said the caption married who had made everyone in their friend group talk. He laughed as if it were a compliment, not a slowly splitting wedge. I laughed too, hollow, and said my husband just needed to join 2025. When I stepped into the night again, the grocery bag swinging, unease returned instantly. Upstairs, the apartment was mostly dark except for a lamp near the hallway desk. Evan sat there quietly, sorting mail into neat stacks with unusual precision. Without turning, he asked if the birthday went how I wanted it to. I answered with another joke about him marrying a rock if he desired stillness. He did not respond, just slid an envelope into a folder labelled bank calmly. On the small desk shelf beside him, I noticed 3 binders arranged carefully. Their labels read home, auto, bank, and they already looked thicker than before. I made a snide comment about him dating the filing cabinet at this point. He said he was making sure things stayed clear and organised around responsibilities. His voice carried no anger, only a final kind of quiet distance. When he stood, his wallet and keys were no longer on the kitchen counter. Instead, they sat in a small tray inside the guest room, beside folded shirts. I teased him about moving out without telling me, calling it dramatic and childish. He simply replied that he slept better with space and hoped I enjoyed my nights. Later, lying in bed, I scrolled through Bree's new group chat titled Harborline Recap. Someone had posted the clip from the after-party screen, tagging me with flaming emojis. Comments flooded in, calling me fearless, wild, and too hot for marriage chains. I focused on those words until they blurred, using them like a lullaby. When I finally went to refill my water, I passed the guest room doorway. Evan's phone lit up on the nightstand with a brief message preview. All files uploaded follow-up appeared for a second before the screen darkened. I told myself it was just some boring work update and went back scrolling. I woke up Sunday feeling almost hungover from attention, not alcohol, which amused me. Still, something about Evan's quiet face at dinner kept nudging the edges. I decided fresh air and Nora's laughter at the park would fix everything easily. At the playground, she ran toward the swings while I scrolled through last night's comments. People had written that I didn't look like someone's mother, sounding strangely admiring. When Nora finally tugged my sleeve, I locked my phone and forced a smile. She asked if we could watch Aunt Bree's funny dancing video again later. Then she described Luca's neon jacket and my glitter dress with uncomfortable precision. My stomach folded a little when she said the man wasn't Daddy, though. She said Grandma's neighbour showed the video on her phone after church yesterday. Nora asked quietly why a man who wasn't Daddy was holding my waist. The question sat between us heavier than the swings and climbing frames nearby. I heard myself say he was just a friend helping Mommy dance properly. I added that grown-ups sometimes danced close when music got busy and crowded. She asked if Daddy was sad because of the video and captions. Hearing the word captions from her small mouth felt worse than any adult judgment. I told her Daddy just worried too much and sometimes misunderstood grown-up fun. Saying that out loud made my chest feel hot, like lying before teachers. Nora nodded slowly but did not look convinced, only quieter and slightly older suddenly. When Evan arrived to pick her up for Janet's Sunday dinner, she hesitated. She asked him if he liked dancing and whether he hated Mommy now. He crouched to her level, eyes soft, and said adults made mistakes sometimes. He added that arguing never meant anyone stopped loving her, which sounded painfully reasonable. He did not glance at me while saying it, which irritated me irrationally. They walked toward his car, Nora clutching her backpack like a little shield. I went back upstairs alone, scrolling through reactions to Bree's latest repost again. The comments praising my freedom felt thinner now, like cheap paper after rain. Later that afternoon, I drove to Janet's house, deciding they shouldn't exclude me. I told myself showing up proved I wasn't hiding or ashamed of anything. When I stepped inside, everyone was already seated except one empty chair. Nora sat beside Janet, hair braided, looking freshly washed and small and careful. Evan sat across from them, wearing the blue shirt I always liked secretly. Janet greeted me politely but without the usual hug, hands still on serving spoons. On the wall behind the table hung a large paper calendar with flowers. One particular Tuesday, 2 weeks away, had a red circle drawn thickly around it. There was no label, just that bright ring, humming quietly in my thoughts. I decided it was probably some silly neighborhood event or doctor appointment nonsense. During dinner, conversation stayed mostly around Nora's school and Janet's new gardening obsession. Whenever someone mentioned work or nightlife, Janet's eyes flickered toward me briefly, then away. Nora barely touched her potatoes, asking instead whether we could all live together forever. Janet answered gently that families sometimes changed shape, but love could still stay steady. The phrase changed shape lodged in my chest like a pebble in a shoe. After dessert, Evan offered to drive Nora home while Janet cleared plates determinately. I followed him into the hallway, announcing that I could handle bedtime myself. He said quietly that Nora slept better lately when nights were calm and predictable. His tone implied I did not provide calm or predictable, which offended my pride. I snapped that he was turning my child against me with passive rules. He replied that children watched actions more than speeches, still refusing to meet my eyes. While he helped Nora put on her shoes, I wandered back toward the dining room. The red-circled date glared at me again, suddenly more suspicious than before somehow. On a small side table beneath the calendar lay neatly flipped mail stacks. One envelope corner showed our surname with official print, already opened and resealed carefully. I told myself Janet and Evan were probably rearranging bills because of his panic. Later that evening, back at our apartment, the atmosphere felt different the moment I entered. The guest room door stood half open, revealing folded clothes and a calmer order. Evan had moved more of his things there, leaving our bedroom oddly unbalanced visually. His main wardrobe hung emptier, spare hangers clinking softly when I opened the door. I called out that changing rooms without discussion was manipulative and childish on principle. From the guest room, he answered calmly that space made everyone breathe easier right now. His voice carried no apology, just that steady finality I had started recognizing lately. In the living room, his laptop sat open on the coffee table again. A folder tree filled the screen with names like Archive Cassia 2025. Before I could read deeper, he walked past and clicked the window smaller instantly. He said he was just organizing old photos and digital clutter, sounding almost bored. I joked that nobody archived someone they intended to cherish, only people preparing to exit. He neither agreed nor denied, simply asked whether I remembered Nora's medical appointment schedule. The practical question in that moment felt like a quiet slap across ego. Later that night, while I scrolled Bree's stories, a low mechanical sound started humming. It came from the guest room, mixed with a faint smell like burnt paper. I followed it and found Evan feeding old receipts into a small shredder slowly. Beside him stood another stack of papers untouched, clipped together, clearly spared from shredding. I asked if he was destroying evidence or planning to fake his own death. He replied that he was clearing duplicates and keeping what actually mattered for responsibilities. The phrase that mattered made me suddenly aware that I wasn't standing on that stack. I laughed it off and accused him of being addicted to office supplies. He smiled slightly, the saddest smile, then turned back to the shredder without arguing. When I went to bed alone, our room felt bigger and somehow temporary. The space where his alarm clock used to sit looked strangely naked and hollow. I lay scrolling until the screen blurred, trying to drown everything with new content. At some point, a school app notification appeared again about Thursday's parents' meeting reminder. It listed both our names, requesting attendance to discuss upcoming events and routines. Before doing that, I noticed Evan had already added the meeting to his calendar. A small note beside it reads, "Simply discusses the schedule clearly in plain, calm handwriting." Seeing that phrase felt more threatening than any accusation or shouted insult ever could. The next morning, he moved through the kitchen like a guest instead of a partner. He rinsed his own mug, checked Nora's backpack, and left without asking my plans. When I complained that he hadn't kissed me goodbye, he just looked surprised briefly. Then he said we shouldn't pretend things were normal when clearly they weren't anymore. He picked up his bag from the guest room chair and left quietly. I told myself he was overacting and I might need to leave first. Still, every time I closed my eyes, I saw that red-circled date ticking closer. I answered dramatically that I was considering a break, maybe moving out. During lunch, I decided to surprise Evan with coffee at his office. When I arrived, his floor looked the same, grey carpets and humming printers. He seemed different though, calm like someone who had already made a decision. On his monitor, I noticed a small yellow sticky note reading Bring Forms. Beside it, his digital calendar displayed Harbour Court, 11:45 meeting personnel. Before I could ask anything, he minimized a document labeled simply Statement on screen. He introduced me to a co-worker as Nora's mum instead of my wife. I handed him coffee and joked about dating his filing cabinet instead. Later in the school pickup line, the air smelled like car exhaust. Evan buckled Nora in gently while explaining tomorrow's schedule in careful, simple sentences. He barely looked at me, like I was another administrative detail to manage. His phone buzzed with an alarm that read paper drop 4:50. At home that evening, the guest room looked even more like a base. Neat stacks of envelopes lined the desk, each bundle clipped and carefully labelled. A single USB stick sat in a dish, dated from last week. I teased him about preparing for some imaginary trial against his own wife. He replied that he was only collecting clarity, not punishment, which sounded rehearsed. When I accused him of scaring me with cold distance, he stayed seated. He said shouting never fixed anything, and adults solved problems in proper ways. Then he added that he would handle everything properly now, one step at time. As he returned to the guest room, his phone lit with new notifications. For a second, I saw a file uploaded successfully before the screen dimmed again. The courthouse lobby felt colder than I expected for any family discussion. I told myself it was just a meeting to fix our routines. Bree scrolled beside me while I prepared speeches about jealous, controlling husbands. A man approached, confirmed my full name, and placed an envelope carefully. He said I was being served a divorce petition with temporary orders. Inside, Harbourline videos and married captions appeared under a list titled Incidents. The clerk stamped our case notice, setting a preliminary hearing exactly 6 weeks away. Janet led Nora toward the children's room while Evan calmly signed acknowledgement nearby.